This is David Bergantino, author of the Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror series. You're listening to the 80s Slasher Librarian's audiobook presentation of Virtual Terror. Keep it scary out there.
Hey Slashaholics, this is the 80s Slasher Librarian. Be sure to check out and join the Facebook group page, follow the channel on Twitter and Instagram, and also check out the merch store and the Patreon page. The links to all of these are in the description below. Just let you know, I depend on horror fans like you to keep this channel going and growing for years to come. Cannot monetize the channel due to the content and the copyrights surrounding it. So the Patreon is what keeps the channel funded. You can sign up and support the channel for as low as $2 per month. You get some great rewards depending on the tier you select. You get early access to certain content, a weekly exclusive podcast only on Patreon. You can also voice characters in audiobook narrations. You can get free merch, free ebooks, and so much more. Check out the Patreon page and sign up today for as low as $2. Really use your support, and you'll be helping this channel keep going and growing for a long time to come.
Be seen in your dreams. When I want you in my arms, when I want you, and all your charms. Whenever I want you, all I have to do is dream, 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 dream. When I feel blue in the night and I need you to hold me tight. Whenever I want you, all I have to do is dream. Just remember, I can make you mine, taste your lips of wine, anytime, night or day. The only trouble is, gee whiz, I'm dreaming my life away. I need you so that I could die.
Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, Virtual Terror, by David Bergantino. Chapter 9. Keith was exhausted by the time he returned home that afternoon. The general stress he had been under, coupled with the day's excitement, had worn him out. His head ached, so he went up to his room, took a couple of Tylenol, and lay down for a nap. Less than an hour later, the phone rang, waking him up. "Yeah," he said groggily. "Hi, Keith, it's Carrie." He sat up, instantly awake. "Is something wrong?" No, she said quickly. "Not really. I was just wondering if you'd come over." "Sure," he replied suspiciously. "What's up?" "I know how this is going to sound, but I need you to look at my car." She spoke quickly before he could interrupt. Then she started to cry. "I barely made it home from the police station. I'm sorry. I feel so weird calling you, but my car's dead, and you're the only one I can call now." Her voice hitched, and she became frantic. "I'm stuck at home. I need someone to talk to, but Mario's aunt isn't letting him on the phone. This is driving me crazy." "I'll be right over," he said when the tears finally overcame her. Keith hurried over to her house. When he pulled into her driveway, he saw Carrie at the front door waiting. "I feel so terrible about this," she began as he approached, but he wouldn't let her finish. "Don't think about it. Now, tell me what the car's doing." She breathed deeply, resolving not to cry. "It started making this hissing noise, and now it won't idle," she told him. "It stalls at almost every stoplight." Keith asked her to start the car while he looked under the hood. It didn't take him long to discover that leaking oil had rotted some tubing leading to the carburetor. After Carrie turned off the engine, he cut out the bad section of tubing and temporarily patched the connection. "We'll have to go down to the auto parts store to get new tubing, but it doesn't have to be done immediately," he said. Keith could tell there was much more on her mind than her car. He wouldn't rush her, though. That never worked with Carrie. She watched him as he put his tools away. "How did you learn about cars?" she finally asked. "I taught myself," he replied. "Why?" "Because I had no one to teach me." He closed the lid of the toolbox. "Cars were something I grew up thinking a kid learned from his father. Well, when I realized that wasn't going to happen, I decided to figure it out for myself." That's amazing. She seemed truly impressed. Keith just shrugged. I think I'd be better at it if I had learned from someone who knew, like my father, but I guess I do okay. Not every guy knows how to fix cars, she told him. Mario couldn't have done that. Yeah, well, people learn different things, he replied. Mario doesn't talk about his father much, but I bet he taught him something. What makes you think your father would have taught you about cars? Carrie asked. Keith shrugged again. I don't know what I would have learned from my father. That's why I've taught myself so many different things. I guess I've been hoping to stumble upon my one true talent. So far, I haven't found it. I'm a consistent runner-up, still looking for the blue ribbon. Now he was embarrassed. This issue had never come up while they were dating. Do you think I'm fooling myself using the fact that I was raised without a father as an excuse for being mediocre? But you're not mediocre, she gently insisted. How many people can do half the things you can do? Not many, but there's always someone who's better than me. Like Scrag with cars, Mario at wrestling, heck, Pam's better athlete than I am. Even Sandra, she blows me away academically. What about me? Carrie asked. How am I better than you? Keith was embarrassed to say. You're just more... He began to stutter, then stopped talking and steadied himself. You're just more... wonderful. What a sweet thing to say, Carrie said, moved by his sincerity. Keith laughed nervously. Of course that means I think I'm okay myself. Pretty shallow of me, huh? You're not shallow, Keith, she declared. Insecure sometimes, sensitive, and definitely thin-skinned, but not shallow and not mediocre. Then she became very serious. And you are wonderful. I don't know what I would have done this afternoon if you hadn't come over. Whatever's happened in the past, you're very important to me. And I'm not the only one who feels that way. Mario feels it. And I'm sure Pam does too. You've brought us all together, Keith. He almost choked at the thought of himself bringing them together. Her and Mario. Carrie noticed the look on his face and seemed to read his mind. You know what I mean. Regardless of who's dating whom, you'll be the one holding our group together. She waited for him to reply, but all he could do was stand there and blush. Carrie changed the subject. Now, what makes you think Mario killed Scrag? She asked bluntly. The question hit him like a body blow. I never... he began to protest. No, you never did say that, she interrupted. But you've been acting strange, like you've been hiding something, and rushing off like you did today. Do you know something about it? Keith was suddenly on guard. He was not prepared to tell her about the poster. I don't know anything, he told her. It's been a weird day. I mean, we're talking about Mario killing someone. Isn't that enough to make any of us act strange? Carrie didn't answer him immediately. That was when Keith realized she wasn't really discussing his doubts about Mario, but her own. What do you think? He asked her carefully. She looked away, then took another deep breath. Mario's been acting strange too, she finally said. For the last couple weeks, he's not been home when he's usually home. He's been secretive, and he's been getting angry very easily. I've been ignoring it, hoping it would go away. Then the fight with Scrag, who ends up dead? Carrie searched Keith's face for an explanation. Do you think he did it? That's just it, I don't know. He's focused a lot of anger on Scrag lately. Maybe he got involved with Scrag somehow? Mario and Scrag doing business? He asked, interrupting her. He always said Scrag reminded him of punks from his old neighborhood. You saw Mario's aunt at the station. She wasn't surprised. Hell, she said he had killed someone before. Maybe he had I don't know, a relapse or something. Besides, she said quietly, can't you tell he has it in him? I can. So Mario's demons had been evident to Carrie as well. Keith didn't reply. Carrie was looking to him for support, but it was hard to be the rock when he felt like crumbling himself. Carrie, he said, this has been a tough day for all of us, but most of all for Mario. Maybe we should give it a rest and give him a chance. Best friends don't turn around and suddenly become murderers. Mario's my best friend, and if you're dating him, he should be your best friend. You're right, I know, she told him. I haven't talked to anyone about this. Who could I talk to but you? This is so confusing, especially with the way he's been acting. Maybe he's going through something we haven't mentioned yet, but it doesn't mean he killed Scrag. He approached Carrie to give her a hug. I have to get home for dinner. My mom still doesn't know about my hand, and I should tell her before the insurance bill comes in. She hugged him long and then kissed his cheek. I'll call you tonight, Keith said. Thanks for fixing everything, she told him, and he left. Keith's mother was home making dinner when he returned. She saw the brace on his hand and dropped the spatula she was holding. Her reaction was similar to what Keith would have expected if his hand had been amputated. It was a good thing she couldn't tell his ribs were bruised. But fussing made his mother feel better, so he didn't complain. Overreacting soothed her guilt for not being around more often. During dinner, he told her about Scragg's murder. Her only comment was, "Wasn't he the drug dealer?" Keith's phone rang while he was in the middle of doing dishes. At first, he didn't recognize the voice whispering on the other end of the line. "It's me," the voice repeated. "Mario." "Hey, what's—" "I can't talk long," Mario interrupted. "My aunt's in the bathroom right now. She's not letting me out of her sight tonight, dude. The police were actually pretty cool, but my aunt thinks I'm in trouble." "Are you?" Keith asked. Mario should have jumped down his throat at the question. Instead, Keith thought he hesitated slightly. "No. At least I didn't kill anyone, no matter what she told you." He was pleading for Keith to believe him. Then Keith heard a toilet flush in the background. Mario gasped and swore. "I'm out of here, dude. She's letting me go to school tomorrow, and I'll tell you all about it then." "All right, call me if—" "I'll be okay," Mario said hurriedly, and the line went dead. After his conversation with Mario, Keith went up to his room. As soon as he entered, he could feel mysterious presence. It had been waiting for him. He spun quickly to leave, but found himself rooted in place. His eyes were drawn to the picture. Involuntarily, his vision blurred. His head began to pound slowly. He tried tearing himself away, but the power of Mysteria held him fast. The dots swirled and an image formed. Another face, a new one. This time he saw a woman. By the wrinkles in her face, Keith guessed she was in her 80s at least. Her eyes were closed in what appeared to be sleep. Her mouth was drawn down at the corners, as if she were experiencing a nightmare. Then the main force of the headache hit without warning. It violently severed his connection with the poster, and he fell back onto his bed. Lying there, Keith barely had the strength to move. Forcing himself to stand, he stumbled to the bathroom and downed 3 Tylenol to fight the pain. Through the tangle of his thoughts, one broke free. He had to find Mel, but for now, he couldn't even see straight, so he made it back to his bed and willed himself unconscious so the pain relievers could go to work. The sun had set by the time Keith awoke. His head still ached, but he could function. In the dim light, Keith noticed the light on his answering machine blinking. He'd been out cold and had slept through the ringing of his phone. He pressed the play button. After a lengthy rewind, the tape reversed and began to play. A female voice rose from the speaker. "Keith, it's Sandra?" She sounded exhausted and upset. I need to talk to you. It's about Mario. I think he killed Scrag." She broke down entirely. "The police don't believe me. No one believes me. I don't know why you would, but at least you'll listen to me, won't you? Because I know why he did it. It has to do with you." At this point, she seemed to get a hold of herself. "Meet me at the school tonight at 8:30, in the front by the sign. You know Mario. Maybe you can convince me I'm wrong. I just feel like I'm going crazy. I'll be there at 8:30. If I don't hear from you before then, or you don't show up, I'll call again. Please come. Please." He could hear the sobs beginning again as she hung up. Keith looked at the clock. It was 8:10. He didn't know Sandra's number off the top of his head. Instead of wasting time, he recorded a new outgoing message on the answering machine. "This is Keith. Sandra, if this is you and you're at the school, stay there. I'm coming. Otherwise, please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." He pressed stop, rewound the tape, and played it back again to make sure he could be understood. As he was leaving his room, the phone rang. He ran back and answered it. "Sandra?" There was only the sound of street traffic. "Hello?" A tentative male voice said, Hello, is, Keith there?" "Yeah, this is me." "Hey, man, it's Mel. Heard about your friend Scrag," he said. "We gotta talk." "I know. I was looking for you at the mall today," Keith told him. "And I saw another face tonight." "Another one?" Keith was alarmed by Mel's eager excitement. "Then we definitely gotta get together. I got some info for you on the poster." Keith instantly let Mel's odd reaction slide. Information on the poster was what he wanted, but Sandra was waiting for him, so he couldn't talk. "Can I call you back?" he asked hurriedly. "I have to go out and meet a friend right now." "I'm at a payphone." Keith remembered that Mel's phone had been disconnected. "If you're going to go out and around, why don't you stop by later? I'm not doing anything. If," he added suspiciously, "you promise not to tip anyone off to where I live." "Look, I don't care what you did," he said, frustration growing. He didn't want to be late for Sandra. "But I gotta run. Call back in a few minutes and leave me your address and directions on my machine. I'll check in after I meet my friend and come right over." "No police, promise?" Mel asked dramatically. Sheesh, Keith thought. He's acting like he's on the 10 most wanted list. "Promise," he said, and hung up before Mel could speak further. He heard the phone ringing again as he got into his car. As he drove away, something nagged at Keith. For several minutes he couldn't identify the source. Then he realized that it was Mel's call that he found so disturbing. He had never given Mel his phone number, or even his last name. So how had Mel known how to reach him? He suddenly wondered if he should have asked to meet Mel in a public place. Chapter 10. Keith waited in front of the school for over an hour, but Sandra never showed. He got out and prowled the grounds, thinking maybe she'd taken a walk to work off some steam. But there was no sign of her, and the school's payphone was out of order. He'd try calling her from home later after he met with Mel. Half an hour later, Keith parallel parked on a dark street in the seedy area of Springwood. The smell of rot permeated the air and trash blew across the cracked sidewalks. The leafless trees seemed to be trapped in a perpetual autumn. Keith's instincts told him he was heading blindly into an ambush, but there was no turning back, he decided. Keith walked up the main drive of the trailer park, shabby aluminum and plastic trailers lined up on either side of him like the keys of a poorly maintained piano. Strong odors of spicy foods wafted from partially open windows. At times, the odors seemed to be trying to outstink one another. He finally came to Mel's trailer. It was set apart from the rest and surrounded by a larger plot of weeds and gravel. It looked like Mel had gotten himself a deluxe trailer lot. As Keith approached the trailer door, he heard the sound of a running shower. That was a new wrinkle, Keith thought. He never would have figured Mel for the kind of guy who actually bathed. On the other hand, maybe coincidence had brought Keith over the one night of the month when Mel did practice personal hygiene. Whatever the case, Keith was early and Mel was not ready. The feeling of walking into an ambush was still strong, and Keith decided it wouldn't hurt to stay outside and check around first. A good-sized storage shed set near the back end of the trailer. It looked like a good place to start. He opened the shed door, and the weak rays of the trailer entry light illuminated a few items within. The usual assortment of tools leaned into corners or hung from hooks or a pegboard. He could make out a hoe, a rake, an axe, and other gardening equipment. As his eyes adjusted, he made out other shapes against the shed's back wall. They appeared to be ovals with jagged edges. At first he thought they were shark jaws like he had seen in movies. He stepped forward to look at them more closely. A spider web hit him in the face. Sweeping it out of the way with his hand, he realized it was a little thick for a spider web. Reaching up, he found a string and pulled it. A low wattage bulb lit up the shed with a sickly yellow light. Now he could see the contents of the shed clearly. Most of the debris cluttering the floor and walls seemed appropriate. But the back wall was something else entirely. Instead of shark jaws, the shapes dangling from hooks were animal traps. Large iron traps like the pioneers used to use. At least 3 of them were big enough to trap bear. Other smaller ones of varying sizes hung on nails around the larger ones, like a dangerous constellation. But why the hell would Mel have bear traps, Keith wondered. Springwood was hardly bear country, let alone trapping country. And somehow he couldn't see Mel stalking the wilderness in a coonskin cap. Keith half wished he hadn't seen this. His uneasiness had only grown worse. He shuddered and stepped back. A strong hand gripped his shoulder. He yelled and launched himself forward, nearly landing against the largest bear trap. Laughter came from the doorway behind him, and he spun to face whoever was there. "Gotcha!" laughed Mel. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, and his hair was wet. Keith immediately felt ashamed for snooping. "You're early." "Yeah, well, I didn't meet my friend after all," Keith said, catching his breath. "So I thought I'd come straight over." "Did you knock?" "Yeah," Keith lied feebly. "But you were in the shower, so I guess you didn't hear me." "And I didn't hear you turn off the water," he thought to himself. "Sorry about that," Mel replied amiably. He continued as if nothing were wrong. Then he gestured toward the traps. "Cool, huh?" "I guess," Keith replied, looking them over once again. "But what are you, some kind of closet Daniel Boone?" "No," Mel laughed. "I guess not. Actually, I inherited them from a grandfather, if you can believe that. Nobody else in the family wanted them. I mean, $1 million would have been better, but at least it wasn't a set of china. You know what I mean?" Keith nodded. "I'm really sorry about coming in here," he suddenly blurted. But Mel didn't seem the least bit upset. "Don't sweat it." He winked conspiratorially. Keith should have felt relieved, but instead he got the distinct impression that Mel was toying with him. "I would have done the same thing. Come on inside." He motioned for Keith to follow and led the way across a concrete patio. The interior of the trailer was messy and depressing, but consistent with Keith's image of Mel. "Sit anywhere," he told Keith, "and if anything's in your way, just throw it aside." Taking his advice, Keith tossed a pile of clothes onto the floor so he could sit down. "So, what happened to your friend?" Mel asked. "She never showed," Keith answered him. "You know how that goes." Mel offered Keith something to drink, but he declined. "So," Keith asked, hoping Mel would launch into an immediate explanation. But Mel just smiled calmly. "Anxious, aren't we?" he said, and went into the kitchen. Keith felt again like he was being toyed with. "Of course I'm anxious. I saw another face, an old woman's. Somebody else may be in danger. If you know anything that might prevent something horrible from happening, I want to know about it." "Sit down, relax," Mel told him as he returned from the kitchen. "Tell me something. Do you know who this old woman is?" "No," Keith admitted. "Then there's nothing we can do about it, is there?" Mel sipped his beer. "I called Virtue Illusions, main office. After being kicked around the phones, they finally put me through to their PR department. The woman there said they have about 10 guys working on computers spewing out these posters. Mysteria was a joke. One of their artists is quite the prankster. It was never supposed to be distributed. This is the first one that's shown up. It may be the only one. There may be more. She didn't know." Keith was confused. "I don't get it. What's the joke?" "Apparently there is no picture in Mysteria." "But I saw," Mel interrupted. "I don't know what you saw, but the woman said the artist created an empty picture to fool people, make them get splitting headaches trying to see a picture that doesn't exist. It's the lemming treatment, so to speak. Anyway, there's more." He paused with a dramatically raised eyebrow, then continued. The company wants very much to get it back, he said, his tone indicating that he thought this proved a conspiracy of epic proportions. Then, almost glibly, he added, Of course, she told me it was only a PR concern. After all, it was a joke that was never supposed to be told, blah, 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 blah. But I saw two faces in it. Well, she claims it's blank. And besides, even if there was a picture, they can't be made with more than one separate image. So there'd still be a problem with your story. But I swear I saw them. And Scragg was murdered, Mel, just like in the poster. Mel smiled slyly. Yes, he was. Then the smile melted away. But I couldn't tell her about that, could I? She kept asking for my name. I wouldn't give it, of course. Maybe you're holding on to some dirty secret of theirs. Instead of answering Keith's questions, Mel was only raising more. What could the company have done to create a poster like Mysteria? And why would they want to? Listen, if it bugs you that much, get rid of it, Mel said, as if that would be the easiest thing in the world to do. I can give you that woman's number if you want. They'll email you a postage-paid label and everything. Even pay you a reward. At least that's what she told me. Then Mel's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, his casualness not quite masking a leap in his intensity. Let me buy it off of you. That way it's out of your hands, but it hasn't fallen into the wrong hands. Then he leaned back and laughed, completely casual again. And if you miss it, I'll let you come visit. I don't know, Keith replied carefully. Mel was up to something. Wouldn't that be like cursing you? Mel nodded appreciatively. I guess so, but then I deserve it. I cursed you in the first place, so you can get me back. But you didn't do it knowingly. The devilish smile returned. How do you know? Mel asked. And for a moment Keith was certain that he had done it on purpose. But then Mel burst out laughing. Boy, this thing has really got you going, he chuckled. So let me have it and you won't have to worry anymore. Keith frowned. He saw now that Mel had been playing on his fears, trying to frighten him into giving up the poster. Did he want whatever reward the company was offering, or did he have some other purpose? I can't give it to you, Keith said firmly. Mel was clearly disappointed. I should follow this thing through. I could use your help, but it's up to you. I'm keeping the poster. It felt good to stand firm about something. He wasn't sure about his next step, but he knew it would not be a sidestep. All right, I understand, Mel told him. But maybe you should bring it here. Keith tensed up. Don't worry, I'm not gonna cold cocky and take off with it. It'd just be easier for me to figure out what was going on with it if I could see it. But you didn't notice anything strange before you sold it to me, Keith pointed out. I know, but maybe I will now that it started doing whatever it's doing. I'll think about it, Keith said. Mel seemed willing to let the matter drop. After a moment of silence, Keith rose to leave. There seemed to be nothing else for the two of them to discuss. Thanks for your help, he said, awkwardly offering Mel his uninjured hand. Maybe I'll stop by with the poster later in the week. Mel stared at his outstretched hand with surprise. You're not leaving already, are you? Suck me dry of information and then toss me aside? Keith didn't know how to respond. Mel's agitation appeared genuine. I should get home now, Keith told him finally. Mel shook his head. That's pretty cold. I do this for you, offer you a beer, which you refuse, tell you what you want to know, and you're not even going to hang out? Keith suddenly felt very self-conscious. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that you're just a user like the rest of them. But you came looking for me. You asked me for help. I gave it to you. Now you run off. I thought you were cool, man. I am cool, Keith replied stupidly. Mel's tense expression eased a bit. Then why don't you hang out for a bit? You don't have to have a beer, just hang. All scary posters and no play makes Keith a dull boy. Keith felt guilty. While Mel's sudden shift of behavior was unnerving, it was understandable. Not only had he selfishly pumped Mel for information, he had been caught snooping, and Mel had even forgiven it. Now he was just going to take off without regard to how accommodating Mel had been? It was rude and stereotypical. No doubt this was how Mel had been treated in high school. So Keith sat down. Glad you could stay, Mel smiled, affable again. Don't get a chance to hang out very often. You can guess I don't have tons of friends. Sure you don't want a beer? Yeah, I'm okay. Keith was aware he was being played by Mel, but even though he had overreacted the abandonment scene, Keith guessed it had genuine roots. That dream your girlfriend had was pretty spooky, Mel said. Freaky stuff. He took another swig of his beer. You were eavesdropping on us? Keith asked, shocked. Not really, he said with a little annoyance. I mean, I heard the whole dream exchange thing, but I didn't plan on listening. I was in the place before you were, he explained. I saw you, but you didn't see me. You were too wrapped up in your friends. I came over to talk to you, but Pam, is that her name, was telling her wolf dream and I didn't want to interrupt. And after that, I never really got a chance to say anything. Because right after that last dream, the one with the angry mob, the fight started. You just never noticed me standing there. You should have said something, Keith told him, uncomfortable with the thought of having been watched for so long without knowing. Like I said, Mel told him, I really didn't get a chance, and I didn't want to intrude. He took a long drink from his bottle. Besides, he admitted, I was a little afraid you guys would want nothing to do with me. Too bad I had a dream all ready to tell, too. I figured it'd be the price of admission. Price of admission to what? Keith asked. To your group, Mel told him. But oh well, maybe next time. He sighed and finished the last of his beer. So what was your dream? Keith asked him. Mel's face lit up as if it were finally Christmas Day. I've forgotten most of the details by now, but in this dream, I'm sitting on that chair, he said, pointing to where Keith sat. I'm watching TV, cable actually, and every channel is showing war, murders, death, and general destruction. But I keep watching, and here's the thing. I'm smiling. I just can't stop smiling at whatever awful scene is on that TV. He stopped and watched Keith anxiously. So, what do you think? Keith thought a moment and said, well, for one thing, you're always smiling, and for another, I think you should stop watching television. Mel's face froze in horror for a moment. Obviously, he thought that Keith was making fun of him. Then he realized that his new friend was simply trying to lighten the mood. Well, now that I've got that off my chest, there's a bunch of things I have to do right now, he told Keith. So I gotta kick you out. I hope you don't mind. As Keith stood, he allowed a trace of disappointment to grace his expression. I'm gonna see if I can find out anything more about that poster of yours. I'll call you if I do. That reminds me, Keith said. How did you know my phone number? I didn't give it to you. Mel's expression became a blend of embarrassment and pride. Actually, I went to your school between classes. I sneaked into the library, found a yearbook, and looked you up. Then I called information. I hope you don't mind, he added, almost as an afterthought. No, I guess not, Keith said. Anyway, if something happens, or you just want to hang out sometime, drop by. Maybe I'll see you at the coffee shop and I can meet your friends. Keith nodded and left, his stomach churning. Chapter 11. Early the next morning, Keith saw the glow of the stadium lights as he approached school. He wondered why they were on since the day was perfectly sunny. Pulling into a parking space in the school lot, he noticed red lights flashing on the football field. A fire department ambulance and a hook and ladder vehicle were parked beneath one bank of lights, along with a black and white police car. A crowd was gathered around them. Keith ran to see what was going on. As he neared the scene, he noticed the fire department ladder extended toward the lights, nearly touching an object suspended before the lights. It was a body. Keith reached the edge of the crowd as two firemen started climbing the ladder. Someone yelled Keith's name. Looking around, he saw Carrie waving at him. She was with Pam and Mario. He pushed his way toward the front of the crowd and joined them. The ladder extended to just below the legs of the body. The first fireman up the ladder stood precariously on an upper rung, shielding his eyes from the bright lights with one hand, reaching around the body's waist with the other. In doing so, he brushed one arm against a stadium light, yelled, and recoiled quickly. "Will somebody turn these goddamn lights off?" he yelled down. "What the hell happened?" Keith asked his friends. "No one knows," Mario told him. "Looks dead to me." Do they know who it is?" Keith asked, not sure he really wanted to know. "Not yet," Mario said. "The fire department just got here." Finally, the lights were turned off and the firemen could proceed. For the first time, Keith could see more than just a silhouette. But the view only lasted a second as the firemen wrapped a tarp around the corpse. The body had surely been that of a female, and Keith thought he had glimpsed a leather jacket. Her feet stuck out from the bottom of the tarp, and he could see sneakers and the ragged cuffs of jeans. The second fireman held the body at the waist while the first cut the dark cord from which it was suspended. It looked like the cord had been tied around her neck. They slowly carried the body down the ladder. About halfway down, the lower fireman missed a rung and slipped. To keep himself from falling, he grabbed the ladder, releasing the body. The crowd gasped as the body swung away from him. The higher fireman was pulled off balance then, and he too released his hold on the body. Screams rose from the crowd as the body fell to the ground with a sickening thud. A police officer drove out of the way just in time. The tarp had come loose during the fall, and now the body was face down and completely uncovered. Keith felt his head swim, just as it had when Mario had announced Scragg's murder. This time it was Carrie's voice that brought him back to reality. "Oh my God!" she screamed beside him. "Sandra!" She pushed through the crowd toward the body. Keith immediately followed. Carrie clawed at the police officers who tried to keep her from Sandra. "I know her, damn it!" she wailed at them. They finally yielded, also allowing Keith through. Carrie fell to her knees beside Sandra, sobbing. Keith crouched next to Carrie and put his arm around her. A bear of a man in a police uniform approached them. "I'm sorry about your friend," he told them. "What was her name?" Carrie tried to answer but was completely overcome. "Take your time, miss," he told her sympathetically. Then the police officer, whose badge read Farthing, turned to Keith. Keith took a few deep breaths and told the officer Sandra's name. "Are you sure?" Officer Farthing asked. Yeah, definitely," Keith told him dully. It was a continuous effort to fight the gray fog that threatened to smother his mind. "Miss, you may want to look away. We have to be absolutely certain." He put both hands on Sandra's body, preparing to turn her over. Carrie regarded him like a frightened animal, but would not look away. "Okay, is this your friend Sandra?" And he flipped the body face up. After a moment of pure shock, Carrie started screaming. The front of Sandra's clothes were scorched, burned through in some places. Bloodstains splotched her jeans and shirt. The cord had cut into her neck, and blood had spilled from the wound. Much of her hair had burned away from her face, but the face was the worst. It was shriveled and dry, cracked and peeling. Sandra had the face of the old woman Keith had seen sleeping in Mysteria. It's her," Keith choked out. Officer Farthing covered her corpse. He motioned for the paramedics to take it away. What happened to her?" Carrie said, her voice shaking, her face streaked with tears. I'd say she was severely beaten and hung out to dry. Literally. She's been up there all night, and those lights are hot. Leave something in the oven long enough and it'll shrivel up to nothing. That's what happened to your friend." Then Officer Farthing got an odd look on his face, as if he had noticed something in Keith's expression. "You know something about this kid? Does this have anything to do with that murder we had the other night?" "Sandra was Richard Morton's girlfriend," Keith said robotically. "Any reason why someone would want to kill them?" Farthing asked. Keith simply shook his head. He felt drugged. Carrie finally spoke up. "Him, yeah. He was a drug dealer or something." Officer Farthing nodded. "But she wasn't like that. She was a straight-A student, for Christ's sakes." Carrie started sobbing again. Keith wrapped his arms around her. Suddenly he realized that Mario and Pam were nowhere in sight. Officer Farthing pulled out a notepad and scribbled something on the top sheet. He tore it off and gave it to Keith. "I know this is a bad time, but I'm going to want to talk to you both later. Here's my number at the station. Call me, even if you have nothing new to say. I'd at least like to make sure you're all right." Both Keith and Carrie agreed to call. Officer Farthing motioned them to leave then. Keith kept his arm around Carrie as they walked away. By this time, the police had succeeded in dispersing all but the most persistent of gawkers. They found Mario and Pam together in the parking lot. They both looked quite shaken. Mario more so than Pam. Beyond them, Keith noticed many empty parking spaces. Students and faculty were leaving. "They called off school today, dude," Mario told him. Keith looked closely at his friend. He could tell something was happening behind Mario's eyes. Was it her?" "Yeah," Keith said. "You know, she called me last night." They all looked at him sharply. Keith looked at Mario and spoke carefully. "She said she knew who killed Scragg and why." Fear and anger burned in Mario's eyes. "I swear I didn't do it," he said. "She told you Mario did it?" Carrie asked in total disbelief. "Yeah," Keith said, still looking at Mario. "But then she changed her mind and wouldn't tell me why. But I imagine it had something to do with the fight." "What was that fight over anyway, Mario?" "Oh, Scragg was just talking shit," he said abruptly. "Is there a problem, Mario?" Carrie said quietly. "We're your friends. We can help you." Keith and Carrie stared at Mario. Pam looked up at him, silent and pale. His hand gripped his forehead. He started to walk away, but Carrie reached out a hand to stop him. He spun around again, his expression wild now, like the face of a trapped animal. "Look, I didn't like Scragg, and lately he was on my case about something, but that something is the reason why I couldn't have killed him. My motive is my alibi, guys. You see what I mean?" Keith's eyes narrowed to slits as a glimmer of understanding dawned on him. "Where were you when they were killed?" Keith asked in a low voice. Tears welled in Mario's eyes, but he remained silent. Finally, Pam spoke. "He was with me," she said quietly. Keith erupted in fury, leaped at Mario, and slammed him against his car. Mario didn't make a move to defend himself. "You bastard!" Keith screamed, grabbing Mario by the collar. Mario's hands hung limply at his side as Keith battered him again and again against the side of the car. "What am I? A farm team for your girlfriends, Mario?" he yelled. "Is that it?" Like a viper, he turned on Pam. "And you!" He pounded his bruised hand on Mario's car. The pain brought on the tears that had been waiting. "Damn it!" he screamed. "Keith, don't!" Carrie said, reaching for his shoulder. He roughly shook her away. "You stay away, too! Let's talk again in about 6 months, and you can tell me how it feels to be dumped and alone." Carrie recoiled as if he had punched her, and he was glad. She turned and began to cry. He looked around himself and felt good, for once, that he was speaking his mind instead of politely bowing out and being impotently understanding. The feeling lasted until Mario blindsided him and pinned him up against a car. "You finished now?" he hissed. Keith saw the evil Mario before him, totally revealed. "'Cause I'm in trouble, dude. Bigger trouble than if I stole a dozen of your girlfriends. Sandra may have told the police that she thought I killed Scrag. Maybe she told them that Scrag saw me and Pam together and threatened to blow the whistle on us." He released Keith and backed away. "Pam and I wanted to tell you ourselves, both of you. But Scrag was such a dick about it. That's why we got into the fight. But hell, I'm in high school. You think I'm going to go around killing someone because I've been caught cheating on my buddy? No one would believe that you do something like that. They'd laugh. But I'm me. I come from the barrio, and as far as the police are concerned, dude, I'm totally guilty." He laid this out to them, prepared for whatever their judgment might be. Taking a deep breath, he continued. "What my aunt told you is both true and untrue. The people I hung out with killed someone. I saw it happen. But I didn't know it was going to happen. As far as my father was concerned, I pulled the trigger. My aunt felt the same way, but thought I might be rehabilitated. She doesn't feel that way anymore. She thinks I killed Scrag." "So what's the problem?" Carrie asked. "You were with Pam. She'll vouch for you and you'll be fine." "If they believe her, but maybe they'll say she's under my influence." Carrie frowned. "Believe me," he pleaded. "I've seen this stuff happen, especially if the police see you." He looked directly at Keith. "As angry as you are, if you believe I did it, they might believe it. So I'm asking you, dude. I know I don't deserve it, but please help me out, or I'll fry." Keith didn't say anything for a moment. Mario's words were strong, but so was Keith's anger. "This is a hard one," he told Mario, "because I don't know that you didn't do it. I heard that Scrag was killed sometime in the early morning." He focused on Pam, who quickly looked away. Then he turned back to Mario. "Either you killed Scrag, or you were with Pam at 3 in the morning. And I sure as hell don't know which would be worse." With that, he walked away. They called after him, but he didn't stop. He got into his car and drove off. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been chapters 9, 10, and 11 of Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, Virtual Terror by David Bergantino. Gotta say, very good chapters. I got a lot of stuff I need to dissect here and talk about with you. First of all, I want to think that Mel is the killer. And here's why. Okay, if you remember, Keith woke up after he saw like the wrinkled face and stuff on the poster. And, okay, let me rewind a second. I did enjoy the scene with Carrie and Keith when she called him to come to her house and help with her car, which was obviously like a convenient excuse to see him. And I'm really thinking that these two, they're going to have to end up back together, please. I mean, you know, this is like the like kind of like a Dawson's Creek type thing here, but like, you know, my younger self is like, oh, they need to be together, you know. But at the time of reading that part, I had no idea what was coming later, which we're going to get to in a minute. But yeah, it just seemed like that was a convenient excuse to get Keith there to help comfort her. But after Keith went home and had his little thing with his mom, he goes upstairs, sees that face in the poster, takes the Tylenol, which this dude is like a Tylenol addict. I guess he's never heard of Vicodin, you know, or even ibuprofen for that matter. He falls asleep, wakes up, and he realizes he missed the call from Sandra. Here's why I think that Mel is the killer. Follow me here. He goes, before he leaves, he changes the message on his voicemail, on his answering machine, to let Sandra know that if she misses him, he'll call her back, that he's on his way to see her at the school, okay? Keep that in mind. And when he gets there, she's not there, and we all know that's because she's being killed. And then he decides to go ahead, you know, and go to Mel's house. I guess he checks the voicemail, gets the address, goes there. Of course, it's a trailer park, right? But when he gets there, Mel's taking a shower. Here's the thing. Mel had to call him back. If you remember, as Keith was leaving to meet Sandra, his phone was ringing, and that was implying that Mel was calling him back to leave his address for Keith. So Mel would have heard the voicemail, the message thing that he had put on there for Sandra, in case she called. So Mel knew where Sandra was. And when Keith gets to Mel's house, Mel is taking a shower. And Mel is acting really shady. And then, when Keith starts explaining to him that he's seeing victims in the poster and stuff, all of a sudden Mel wants the poster. Comes up with this story that he called and talked to, the PR people and stuff, which I feel like if Keith had actually said, yeah, give me that woman's phone number, Mel would have, given him the runaround or something. Be like, oh, well, I don't have it on me, I'll have to get it, something like that. He didn't expect Keith to actually ask for the number. But it's like as soon as he found out that Keith was seeing the victims in the poster before they died, Mel wanted that poster. That way Keith couldn't, find out what he was doing before he did it. But there's a hole in this theory that I can't seem to get past, and that is, if this is the case, then why does Mel not just kill Keith? Is he afraid somebody else is going to get the poster? Why not kill Keith and then break into Keith's house and get the poster? So I don't know. I'm confused here, but I am intrigued by the story. And wow, what a piece of shit Mario is. First he took Carrie, and now he took Pam. And wow, the way that Sandra got killed is so brutal. So flippin' brutal. It reminded me kind of like in Scream, where Fonzie, the guy that plays Fonzie, Henry Winkler, plays the principal, and he got, gutted and hung from the football, the field goal thing. So anyways, yeah, so Sandra's dead, and part of me, bear with me for a second here, because wow, Keith blew up. He blew the fuck up. That was awesome, and I get it. I'm the kind of person like that too, that holds stuff in until something just pushes me too far, and I explode. So I really like it that I was able to act out that scene, because I have been there before. Sort of, not that extreme. But yeah, it was a great set of chapters, and I'm really loving the story and the drama, and I hope you all are too. But if Mel's not the killer, I don't think it's Pam, because she doesn't really have motive. But it could be Carrie, if it's not Mel. Hang in there with me, because she still has feelings for, Keith. And if somehow she knew, because she reacted the worst out of Sandra dying, which could be an act, okay? But if she knew that Mario was cheating on her and hurting Keith by seeing Pam, that's more than enough motive there. So I don't know, maybe Carrie's the killer? But Mel was acting super shady. He's already a shady character, but all those little pieces I pieced together earlier, don't you all agree that sounds like he's the killer? I mean, maybe there's a reason he can't just kill Keith. Who knows? But the shower thing, him calling and knowing where Sandra's at, all of that points to him. The point is, I cannot wait. I think we're only going to have one more upload of this book. The conclusion should be the next upload. If not, 2 more uploads at the most. And we're going to find out what's going on in Virtual Terror. Let me know in the comment section below what you all thought of tonight's chapters, if you're enjoying this book so far. And remember, we're going to do a back-to-back-to-back set of David Bergantino, Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror books. We're going to be doing this one and the other 2 left that he wrote in the series right after this one. So buckle up. This is the month of Freddy, pretty much. And I'll see you soon with more of Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, Virtual Terror! Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying thanks for listening, be excellent to each other, and pleasant dreams! I'll see you next time. Also, Slashaholics, if you could take the time to please check out the new show on the channel, Slash Tracks. It's like Mystery Science Theater meets horror. It's like Riff Tracks, Mystery Science Theater 3000 with a horror twist. Me and my co-host Alex Vanover, we riff the hell out of these bad horror movies. We're doing a couple Halloween-themed ones this month. Ernest Scared Stupid and then Jacko. So check it out. And check out our intro for the show.